RCMP warning of online radicalization as the Liberals prepare to launch free speech censorship bill. So, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, or RCMP, has issued a warning about a surge in violent extremism among Canadian youth. 5 young Canadians have been arrested in terror-related cases since June, and according to their reports, this is primarily due to an increase in online radicalization. The RCMP notes a concerning trend of violent extremism and terrorist use of the internet among young individuals, emphasizing the need for vigilance among adults in positions of authority. In response, the federal government agreed that there is a need for comprehensive measures to counteract online radicalization and hate speech. For several years, the Liberals have been promising legislation to tackle rising online hatred, but progress has been delayed, in part because of the complexities between combating hatred and freedom of speech. Chantal Aubertin, spokesperson for the Justice Minister, said, quote, "Against the backdrop of the ongoing geopolitical conflicts, we are seeing concerning trends where online radicalization, including hate speech, manifests physically. This is unacceptable. We must put a stop to rising anti-Semitism and Islamophobia." So, what's your thoughts on the RCMP essentially saying we need more censorship?
Yeah, I mean, they're just using this as a tool to usher in this new online harms bill, right? So they tried the Bill C-36. They tried it a couple of years ago. Then it fizzled out. They tried again. It didn't work. I think there's a couple of reasons. They were very divided on the legislation because they're openly saying it now. Like, look, it's an attack on free speech. So we have to sort of tread carefully. So because they weren't able to get things through, I think what happened originally was they're like, here's our plan. Here's our, like, let's look at it as 100%. And 90% of it got hacked away. So basically it was not a plan. And I think what they're doing is they're using instances like the Israel-Palestine war, anything else they can, Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, whatever they can use, because it's pretty wild right now. I do agree it's pretty wild, but I'll get on that in a minute. I think they're using it to show how crazy things are, because this is what they did with COVID, right? They go, things are so bad that you have to let us break the rules to save you. This is the right thing to do for everybody. And I think we're getting into the same situation where they're going, these kids are getting crazy. They're going to burn the whole country to the ground. We have to kill free speech. It's the only solution. So the RCMP said, now look, 5 kids since June. So that's one a month. That's one a month in a country of 40 million people. That in the last quarter let in 430,000 fucking immigrants. Right?
And now, do you know with these 5 people, did they actually pull any instances off, or were they just planning and essentially thwarted?
As far as I know, nothing was executed. So that's what I'm saying. So it's almost you're getting people on thought crimes to begin with, right? So they're using this, in my opinion, this is just sort of a coordinated effort. And they're using another organization. Obviously, it's not the government, it's the RCMP. So the government's going to go, well, look at the problem. We have to fix it for you. So I think that's exactly what's going on now. When it comes to this conflict, I want to point something out. Like, the Israel-Palestine conflict, as far as I know, as far as I can remember, has been the most contentious war that I've seen in terms of how it is spilling over into other countries with protests and with people pushing back against it for both sides, right? So this isn't a Canada problem. And if you go to any major city center right now, you can see that it's not just happening online. So again, what they're doing is they're taking something that's happening globally. They're trying to isolate a small number of incidences, which I would actually need more information on to really say how valid they are. And then they're saying, well, this is why we need to kill free speech. It's 100% bullshit. And it's an attack on the Canadian people. It's what it is.
Sure. And I saw Michael Schellenberger did a very good job of, he was breaking down, he's like, we thought it was kind of a self-evident thing to be like free speech, the good of free speech. But he was saying how he's realized that a lot of the younger people in our societies, in Western societies, haven't actually been told, or they don't understand why free speech is such a good thing. And I mean, it sounds a little idealistic, but the best reaction to bad speech or hate speech or whatever you want to call it is more speech, is good speech, good ideas. And what you end up doing when you put in these censorship mechanisms in place is you just shut down any ability to have a conversation between 2 disagreeing parties. And even if one of those disagreeing parties has terrible ideas, I look at it and go, by you just censoring that person's post or page or whatever it may be, or kicking them off some social media platform, it doesn't change their views on these things.
It sends them into a different echo chamber where there's no one challenging their ideas, which just makes it worse.
Exactly, in which they end up getting radicalized more in that scenario.
Because you need to have your ideas challenged, especially when they're fucking terrible.
And look, I don't think any of my ideas are inherently dangerous, but what I do see is I even have this attitude of with censorship, where when I say something like, I was talking to a representative from Meta recently. I got somebody on the phone and I asked them pretty much like, look, why do I see that my posts on Instagram get 10 times the amount of engagements of pages that have followings way larger than I do? I'll see a video that has 250,000 plays and they've got 20 shares, and my videos get over 1,000 shares and like triple the amount of comments, quadruple the amount of comments, all this stuff. But my videos are lucky to crack 10,000. I'm like, almost everybody that sees my stuff is engaging with it compared to these people. Like, why am I getting no algorithm help? And the guy literally said, oh, well, it's because you're talking about topics like censorship and stuff. And I was like, you understand the irony of censoring people for talking about censorship, right? But to that, what I was saying with my attitude there, when I see stuff like that only makes me double down and go like, okay, fuck you.
Then I need to be here and fight, obviously, because this is what's already happening.
And also, just if I get demoralized and stop trying to do what I'm trying to do because you are trying to silence me, then all I'm doing is turning over, laying on my back, and saying you win.
Yeah, exactly.
So and just being a stubborn person, I'm like, fuck you,
No
you're not gonna win.
Yeah, that's my motivation.
And so the exact same thing happens for people, even though like I'm sitting here, say, fighting for free speech or actual liberal values, but then the people that have these, say, hateful values, it only makes them do the same thing. It only makes them double down. So I actually see online censorship as worsening any problem. I mean, again, this goes back to something I said a couple episodes ago. It's like the cure will be worse than the disease.
Yeah, I mean, there's one other thing too that I would point out, which is sort of a live example of how the censorship game has already worked, right? So when you censor people, what you're doing is you're only censoring one side of an argument. And what did we just say happens? You create a more radical echo chamber, right? So that's exactly what this is going to do. And a good example is what happened at Harvard, UPenn, and MIT, where people are like, Harvard finished last in ranking in free speech. People there were afraid to say anything, especially anything with a Republican opinion. So what happens is you've got this society that says, this is how you have to feel about every issue. If you say anything otherwise, you're deplatformed, demonetized, or you're kicked out of the group. So you create this dangerous echo chamber, and now they've lost control of it, right? With this, well, we're supposed to support Israel, but they're all supporting Palestine. So you see what happens because you can't control this group. You know what I mean? And they can't control the one they currently have. However, I just want to say, just point that out as an example to be like, look, that's what actually happens when you stifle free speech. Because look, I don't think that everyone who supports Palestine is in the same group, right? You can support Palestine because you don't like the murdering of innocent civilians. You don't want to see 20,000 people get killed. You know what I mean? Because that's kind of where they're at right now. So you could be pro-Palestine in the sense that you're pro-peace. Doesn't mean you're anti-Semitic. Doesn't mean you want anything bad to happen to the people of Israel. It means you want the war to stop, right? And what they're kind of suggesting with this thing that's happening in Harvard is, well, if they just had open dialogue, then this would all go away. That's not quite true. But that being said, all of the radical thinkers that are, chanting for the death of Israel and chanting, anti-Semitic things and wanting those civilians to die, yeah, those are easy things to counteract with free speech. If you sit down and have a rational conversation with any one of those people, they're going to go, oh yeah, I didn't think about it that way. You're right. And that's the problem. Like, they're going to take this away right now because it suits their political agenda. But how this works out down the road is going to be so dangerous.
A really good example of how speech and freedom of speech can actually fix the issues that they think freedom of speech is causing is, like, look at somebody like Milo Yiannopoulos, who used to be a massive name in political commentary way back in the day. He, very right-wing troller, essentially. His whole shtick was getting under people's skin and just saying the most
kind of like a Michael Malice, but not as bad.
No, Michael Malice is great.
No. What I mean is, he was, which one? I don't know which one was worse.
Well, Milo was much more. He would say things for this. I think
Malice is a comedian. He's actually really funny.
And I think Malice says I think he'll make jokes out of things he truly believes, but he believes everything that he says. Whereas Milo would take stances just knowing that it's going to rile people up,
Oh, okay, okay,
and he
okay.
he
Yeah.
would just
Right,
he
right,
was
right.
he would like he would just try
Yeah,
to blow up
I have
and
less support
inflame
for that.
people.
I have less
Yeah.
support for that. Yeah,
So,
I don't like that.
but people were constantly trying to shut him down, get him censored, such and such. But it wasn't until he was on a podcast and shared some of his views, which were that essentially he didn't see it as a bad thing if older gay men ushered younger gay men under the age of 18 into what it means to be gay and taught them all this kind of stuff, essentially grooming. He didn't see any issue with that. And then so it's like after that, the podcast's host, it was on Legion of Skanks, they absolutely just shut him down and ripped him apart, and his career was never the same after that.
Yeah.
He's been nowhere.
No, I
Like,
mean, I've
he's
heard
a- he's a-
Rogan talk about it and be like, oh yeah, back in the day when this guy was on the show and everybody used to give him shit about it. He's just like, the guy's a nobody now though.
Exactly, and that happened. That didn't come by way of censorship or anything. It came by way of him exposing his
True beliefs.
true beliefs.
Cool. Yeah.
And then once
society will sort you out. It's like
Exactly.
you put all the ideas out there and society will decide what they like. Don't tell them what they like.
Yeah,
Yeah, I agree.
exactly. Yeah, and I like the one quote that I'll maybe cap this conversation off with here on freedom of speech is the great Orwell quote, where if language can corrupt, if thought can corrupt language, language can also corrupt thought. And as soon as you start saying that certain language isn't allowed, you are in more ways than one trying to control thought. And I don't agree with that at all. I think people should have complete access to all ideas that are present and then sort them themselves. I have a little bit more faith in people than a lot of these authority figures who think that they can't be trusted to think for themselves. We need to think for them. And
I
we
think a
need
lot of it actually, I'm not sure that it's necessarily they think people are all idiots. I think that they've got an agenda and this is how they usher it in.
Yeah.